Trading the foreign exchange market carries high risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Trading on margin, utilizing leverage can carry an even higher level of risk that can lead to a complete loss of investment funds. So before deciding to trade the foreign exchange market or using any of our software alert products, you should carefully and diligently consider your personal investment objectives, level of experience, and risk tolerance. There is a possibility that you could potentially sustain significant loss. You should not invest any capital or trade that you cannot afford to lose. It is your responsibility to be aware of and understand all risks associated with foreign exchange trading and to seek professional advice from an independent certified financial advisor if you have any doubts. Auvoria Prime does not exercise trading authority over your trades. You and you alone exercise discretionary trading authority over every trade.
Forex Factory. You keep in mind, we had some pretty big movement in the dollar on Friday, and I'll show that to you guys. So of note, dollars lift many currencies, especially the majors paired with it. They're a decline. I think a lot of that's just due to the wrangling, if you will, of different thoughts on the street about Jerome Powell's speech. He's our Federal Reserve Chairman. He is the lead governor of the 13 governors regionally. The concerns I think he had was that if we see a huge non-farm payroll, and there's varying degrees of news as to whether it's out on May 4th, it's showing May 5th here. I'm sorry, May 6th, Friday. No, wait a minute. No, that's not right. That's right. So here it is right here. It's showing it's coming out May 7th. I heard it's Thursday, May 6th. So just note that may be a slight break from Forex Factory because I heard it at a different time. But who knows? Maybe they changed it. It's possible they just upped it to Friday. Sometimes they'll adjust around this day depending on the day of the week, but typically it's the first Friday of every month. So keep in mind also there's a lot of stuff going on next week. So, if you're running something like a variable, the new versions are out. Dasan has made a fairly concerted effort, albeit it's a monumental task for one individual, in my opinion, to just roll back to the previous versions of variable. But we spoke a couple times last week, and he assured me it's in process about 2 weeks out. So essentially the old version of variable with the new modern protections and more flexible viewing as well as settings is going to be available. Stratamus, again, we're getting close. I highly recommend you guys listen to Killian's presentation last week. This is the type of software that has two engines to it. One engine's essentially chasing trends up while the other is chasing them down. So it has the ability to sometimes it'll see hedge trades come on, as he was talking about in the presentation, but I'm not going to get too into it. I purposely will not cliff notes the presentation because I want you guys to go see it. So just note, next week we are fraught with risk pretty much every day, including Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, literally all pairs will be affected by movement. So please do yourselves the favor. And if you do not know how to pause the software in advance of these events, typically for me is about an hour in advance, at the very minimum pausing an hour after. Some software has the ability to pause as well. Also note, if this is a surprise to you, the company, as announced, as you'll see on all the channels, if you just log into any of the Telegram channels, that we are going to be disassociating ourselves from Einstein and Alexander. Okay, so maybe this is coming as a surprise to some, not to the internal board members, as we have talked about our concern with just too much risk in the software. It's just blown too many accounts out. And that's the beauty of Gearbox, is that Tyler has taken what is a good martingale strategy, put a lot more protections on in the versions of being able to turn on or off higher or lower gears put out in that trade sequence. But a lot of those big trade 5, 6, 7 in a sequence has just been killers in some of these movements we've seen in the very volatile markets over the last year of a pandemic. So my hat's off to Tyler. Gearbox will be essentially the new modern version of Einstein and Alexander, but it'll be going away as of May 15th. So keep that in mind as well. Anything I want to note about this before we move into the charts? Obviously, Powell speaking. Seems like he speaks every other day. Note unemployment rates for U.S. A lot of bank holidays. This is Labor Day and Green Day for a lot of the Asian markets. So you have 2 days of bank holidays for that. Maybe things will be a little quieter in JPY land. I could be wrong. Do keep in mind also that this is the big one. Not sure if it's Friday or Thursday at this point. So just assume that the U.S. Non-farm payroll is going to be released. And remember, I'm on Pacific time here. So it is released as a report first Friday of every month. Even though this particular Friday is into the next week at 8:30 a.m. New York time. So keep that in mind. So one of the charts. First, I'm going to start off with DXY. Note this reversal on Friday. Okay. Not really necessarily signaled, by the way, in the US bond market. So looking at this is the iShares 7 to 10 year treasury, or even the daily chart on the 20 plus year. So no sort of a foretell, if you will, and this is a pretty big move in DXY. So, I mean, if you look to see, it was the exact opposite on all the other majors, right? So Euro took a hit, okay. GBP, same thing. Here's GBP USD, same thing, took a hit. Still inside the range. Just jumping back to the Euro real quickly. Again, still inside a much broader range. Although with Jason's indicator here, this is what you call a squeeze zone indicator. Sometimes you'll see the, I don't know, yellowish color at the top. Oftentimes the red is signaling a fairly strong support level. Doesn't mean you can't break through it and come back above it. And that's kind of what we're seeing, is we're still in that upper zone range. So, until we have a defined breakout one way or the other, the martingale type, long shorts type systems can trade this. So if we take a look at GBP CAD real quick, I just want to note that this broke from a pattern that it has been in since, as I noted on Wednesday. Be careful of this. There's more than likely when we break, this thing's probably going to zipper down to the bottom of this area, and that's what we're in the process of doing here. So we're probably going to be going after this whole spot 689, whole 69 area right at the bottom, right around 6,900. As you can see, a pretty big move. So consequently, I think it's been a little bit, and this is a daily chart here. It's been a little bit tougher for the softwares that trade this currency. Take a look at the USD CAD. So again, broke what we expected. You got to drop to a weekly chart just to see where we are, and essentially right to that area, this whole 2300 area. I think sort of the bottom of or the edge of the cliff, if you will, is this whole 20 area. So essentially spot 2000 here. I think it's going to be a real magnet for this. Just keep that in mind as you're accepting trades on any MAV version of these softwares. USD CHF, let's drop back to the daily. Notice how the moving averages held us a little bit, but this cross reversed this movement up. Okay, this is a cross essentially of the moving averages. It really isn't as necessarily the amount, but with the 50, 100, and 200 day lines, which is what they all represent. Maybe it'd be easier if I actually have these currencies marked, but a lot of times when they mark it, it mucks up the price scale. You can't really see what's going on, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that. AUD USD, still in that upper range and pretty tight. CAD, Now we've broken below this range where we've already sort of peaked through, but we came back up inside it. Now we've actually printed a full candle below this area at support. So if we're going to continue this potential reversal here, this is the bigger picture of the lift in most of the currencies that are paired with the dollar. Aussie has been strong off the bottom of the pandemic. You're looking at a daily candle chart here for the question I just got. Each of these represents a single day. For those just joining us, note if you open up the chat window, I think y'all can probably see the two links to my presentations on the YouTube channel, and then also the presentation I did on last Saturday at the AP Momentum event, and it was quite momentous. All right, Euro AUD, tight range still, daily chart. Euro CAD. Note the movements here, by the way. We're there. Let's look at the weekly in terms of support. A little bit more. So 4,700 area, right where my dotted line is, this is where we should hold. If not, going down to this area. It's a pretty big move lower. Let's see, there's gold for the question I just had on gold. This is spot US dollar. Still looking to probably break out of this area. So let me drop back to the dollar. It's easier. Daily chart is easier on this. Looking to break out, break higher. GBP NZD, haven't really shown this in a while. Still in a broad range. You know, we poked above it for a while towards the end of March, but came right back down inside it. CAD JPY, same thing, but this one is actually broken out to the upside. So no surprise, the yen's typically been pretty weak in relation to most currencies. So one's accepting trades, and you know, this is not something I'd be shorting. So let's just look at the weekly chart. You know, we're there right at this top point, by the way. See that right there? We're basically there. Actually, let's go to a monthly on this one. This year we are in the real big picture. So as I've talked many times about before, this essentially this 90-ish area is where we're more than likely headed. Should see some pretty decent resistance on a monthly chart for this. I'd be more inclined to accept both sides of the trade when we got to this level. USD CHF. Let's take a look there. It's the monthly chart, so you guys could just see the bigger picture of how tight the range is we've been in from a long period of time. And keep in mind, this was a huge event right here in 15, but it's been pretty solid in terms of its range over the last, what are we looking at, 10 plus years? Let's drop down to the daily. It's a different story, obviously, here. Weekly, we're going to continue to see weakness in the dollar on a weekly. This will translate into weakness on the daily, but we're coming into an area here where we may see some continued support, even though this hasn't really carried over. I still think you've got some pretty solid support in this whole zone. But as I mentioned towards the beginning of the broadcast here, we had a big spike in DXY for those joining us late. Big spike in DXY on Friday. Why? You know, time-wise, where's the center point right here? If you took a bell curve and just put a profile together, whether it's right or left aligned, doesn't matter. The point is you spend a lot of time here. You can actually put a center point on that time-based scale, which is what you're seeing. My dotted line is a rough representation of, with the DXY, since there's no volume calculated on this index, I can't put a market profile chart on it. From a time-based perspective, I can, but TradingView doesn't offer that yet. So when they do, you guys will actually see a lot more time-based profiles, which just helps with more analysis, trying to find center points. I did get a question earlier in the week about anchoring VWAPs, and which is just nothing more than a volume weighted average price. You can anchor them from different points, fractal highs and lows on candles or groups of. So you probably want to anchor one right here, right? You want to anchor a VWAP at the top, have an anchored VWAP here, and then you'll more than likely are probably having a center point or some sort of aggregate is one of the reasons, in addition to a time-based profile that we've popped off of that low. So far, that's holding. So right now, even though this looks like an imaginary line, this 90-50 area on DXY is holding. And we're really going to take, obviously, this week to shake out and see what's taking place. I think the market is probably starting to, I don't know. I think the concern really is for that. The concern that I've gotten from a number of my buddies that sit on different desks trading in New York told me that the street, and maybe this is why the dollar ripped on Friday, the street's really sort of putting together this general thesis that if this report, US-based payroll report, although there's probably going to be a bunch of wage compression because a lot of the restaurant workers and a lot of the folks that are in essentially the service industry in this country are all coming back to work. So I think that's going to put some pressure on wages, but the number's going to be big, and a lot are beginning to change their thought that the central bank is going to begin to taper. So you don't know what that means. In literally almost the last 12 years, generally we have been in what's called a quantitative easing mode, meaning that the central bank is out there purchasing, thus putting cash in all of the primary dealer accounts globally, providing liquidity to the market. So essentially their operations would be opposite of that, and they'd be out there selling treasuries, thus taking a more of a hawkish view or a tapering type of movement. That's very negative for equities, especially at the ridiculously bubblicious level that most global equities are at right now. So if that is a theme that continues to build, maybe it strengthens the dollar. Who knows? Maybe everything I've just said completely wrong and the streets got it read wrong, right? It's possible. So we talk a lot about risk management. So you always want to be thinking, if you have a thesis, right, you've got to understand that you could be wrong and you need to plan for that. What would it look like if I was wrong? So I do spend a fair amount of time on that. Problem with prognostication and all types of forecasting is, just as experts, even though we may know a ton about this, we could just be dead wrong. So that's why I always tell people, choose your own path and do your own research. That'll really help in understanding how we're arriving at some of our decisions. And who knows, you may view it differently, right? Always open to opinions, but it's, in my personal opinion, as in sort of my half-assed economist hat I have on right now, if the Fed starts to taper, equities are going down. And that's going to create some violent movements from a volatility standpoint in the VIX. It's going to put some pressure on different currencies, including the dollar, and I kind of need it ready for that. And this week could be tough from that respect. So if you're trading with money you cannot afford to lose, maybe you want to do an extra week of a demo account, right? If you have never put a demo account in place or run the software based on developers' calls on a demo account, I highly suggest it as step one. Looking back at my presentation on Saturday, I probably should have talked more about risk, because I'll tell you, I could tell just by some of these comments and some of the trolling I do through these chat rooms in our software, you can just absolutely tell the way some of our subs are posting comments. They can ill afford to lose the money that they're trading right now. That's a problem, guys. I'm really not doing my job unless I can convey to all of those. So even though a lot of people are like, hey, I'll just worry about my own business and that, always reach out to the folks you think are struggling and you're up or down like we do a lot in our group, right? Even though our group's small, but they are keenly aware of, can I afford to lose this money or not? And, they try to be patient. As I talked again about in the presentation last Saturday, you got to look at this as a longer term thing. I saw a number of comments in some of the chat rooms while I was just sitting waiting for the airplane. And they're all like, well, I'm going to give it a month and then that's it. And I felt like chiming into some of these chat rooms. What, are you kidding me? Did you not listen to what I talked about? I mean, you have to look at this for like a 3 to 5 year window. There's no way on earth that anybody wealthy that is self-made, right? I'm not talking about inheritance. I'm talking about self-made and trading, has looked at it from a long-term perspective, right? And many of them, made mistakes in the beginning, as we all did, but they learned from them and they had a longer-term, more patient view, right? If somebody is impatient, that's just brings lots of risk to the portfolio, right? But it's also going to have them take a very short-term look at what's going on. There will always be times, hell, we certainly see now with Einstein and Alexander, but there will always be times where, it could take a month or two for, some drawdown to get out of currency trades. And heck, we've certainly seen that with some of these CAD trades, right? I mean, they completely reversed what they did in many cases. Not necessarily the USD CAD chart here. This is just the daily chart, but we, essentially have broken down. So you got to move to the weekly chart, see where your next levels are. Can't see anything there. And then you got to move to a monthly chart. We can finally see that we're at support, maybe even a little bit lower. We're there. So it's either we hold, stay up in this range. This is, pretty big range, obviously, from a monthly chart perspective, or we break below this, fall off the cliff. We're going all the way down to here, which makes total sense because that sort of coincides with the dollar going to 85 long term, right? So we'll have to see how this sort of all plays out. But so that's pretty much all I had. I know you guys had some questions. Hopefully I've got most of them answered here, but I got to take off to a soccer game. So I will wish everybody have a fantastic week. Be kind to each other. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask.